Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Would you find your seat and stand up in front of it if you're able to and sing some worship with us? Surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name, and I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Child of God.
There's nowhere we can hide from your love. You are steadfast, never failing. You are faithful. All creation is in awe of who you are. You're the healer of the sick and the broken. You are comfort for every heart that mourns. Our King and our Savior forever. For eternity, we will sing of all you've done. For eternity, we will sing of all you've done. And we say, God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. Your heart, it moves with compassion. There is life, there is healing in your love. You're the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And for eternity, we will sing of all you've done. We say, God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. Instead, you brought life, Lord. Where there was fear, you brought courage. And when I was afraid, you were with me. And you lifted me up. You lifted me up. Where there was death, you brought life, Lord. Where there was fear, you brought courage. And when I was afraid, you were with me. And you lifted me up. You lifted me up. You lifted me up. Yeah, you lifted me up. And we sang, God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. So oftentimes in life, I know I've felt this way a lot recently, but there's just a lot of crazy stuff that happens in the world, and there's a lot of things that we don't know the answer to. And we want to fix ourselves and we want to fix other people's problems. And usually, like at least for me, I wind up making things worse when I try to fix it, and it's just a whole mess. But what I want you to remember is what we celebrated a few weeks ago on Easter, that Jesus died and rose again for us because he loves us, because he cares. And I want to encourage you today that you can go to him when you don't know what to do and say, Jesus, I have no idea what to do. Can you help me? And he's always available for that. And we're going to continue worshiping. We're going to continue singing. And we're going to offer communion where you can go back and you can take the bread, which represents his body that was broken, and dip it in the juice that represents his blood. And as you do that, maybe it's your time to reach out to him and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? Because he's always there for us. So feel free at any time to do that.
Can't go back to the beginning. Can't control what tomorrow will bring. But I know here in the middle is the place where you promised to be. Unless you come, will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? As I walk now through the valley, let your love rise above every fear. Like the sun shaping the shadow, in my weakness your glory appears. Not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? You meet me here again. As you come, will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again?
God, would you meet us right where we're at? Would you come to us right in the middle of our mess, in the middle of our confusion, in the middle of the mystery, and show us yourself and reassure us that you know what you're doing, that there is a plan. Just remind us today of what you did for us and how much you care. And we give you today, and we ask that you help us learn more about you today. We love you. And in your name, everybody said, amen. Go ahead and take a seat. Thank you so much for worshiping with us today.
Well, good morning, everyone. We're so glad that you're here gathering with us today. If we've never met before, my name's Jesse. I help lead our Moto group, which is the middle schoolers. So if you're in middle school, we've got a few Motos left before the summer. So we'd love to have you join us. And something else coming up soon, and one of the first few weeks of June, we have something called Family Promise. And Family Promise is this super cool time where we open up our facility, the Hub, and we let families who don't have homes call this place their home for a week. So we provide them a safe place to sleep and just be a family together. We provide them with transportation, with meals, and we would love to have you guys be a part of that and help us serve these families. So if you're interested in that or want more information, you can go to wm.church, and there'll be information there. You can sign up, and you'll find the people to contact for that. And a great time to do that is this next time we're moving into called Life Together. So Life Together is this awesome time where it's kind of like a coffee break, but with more to do than just getting coffee, because we have donuts and other kinds of cookies. I spied some no-bakes back there, unless they're all gone. They're really good no-bakes, so you should grab one. There's coffee, there's tea, there's water. You can worship God through giving at one of the giving areas by the doors. And if you are a kid who's in Surf City, so that means you're up through 4th grade, now is your time to go and hang out back there, so you can head back and find your leaders, go back to Surf City. If you haven't been checked in yet, parents, you can bring them back to that area and they can get checked in, get their name tags, get all that stuff taken care of. But otherwise, now is the time for Life Together, and we will see you guys back here in about 5 to 7 minutes. Thanks.
All right. I'll call you back right now. We don't have any fancy bumper video for this series. So I'm Steve Thompson. I am one of the pastors on staff. And so it's always good to hang out with you here at the Hub when I'm teaching. And we are in the latter end of our series called Living Hope. We actually started this series on Easter, if you were around for Easter, by taking a look at how Jesus positioned himself and presented himself as our living hope through his death and resurrection. And so on that day, we were talking about similar to the grave clothes that Jesus left neatly behind in his empty tomb. They're just kind of folded and neatly there. How we tend to hold on to those empty things that aren't doing anything for us anymore. We thought that they'd bring hope. We thought they'd bring purpose, but they didn't, or they don't, or at least not to the same measure that they thought they should or would or could. And so on that day on Easter, we had these little shreds of cloth that represented that. And like most of us, brought up something and dropped it at the foot of the cross saying, I'm not going to hold on to, I'm not going to grasp onto and cling to those things that are dead and useless and not helping me get to where I'm wanting to go. Instead, I'm going to cling to Jesus. And so since then, we've been trying to discern, so if Jesus is our living hope and we're experiencing him as our living hope, then he's calling us to join him in helping other people realize that he is the living hope, both locally and globally. And so that culminated last week in us talking about a brand new partnership that we have with a community called Shone Gerbe in South Ethiopia. And we partner with this town, this village, with this community through an organization called Children's Hope Chest. And so if you guys are familiar with Kids Hope, because we've talked about that for years and partner through Kids Hope as an organization partners one church with one school so that there can be mentorship and mutual partnership kind of stuff going on there. And it's awesome. It's been great. And in the same way, Children's Hope Chest partners one church with one local community in a different country, in our case, Ethiopia, for the same kind of mutual benefit. And so there are things that we have that Ethiopia, that Shone Gerbe could use. And there are things that they have that we could use. And I think on our end, we may not even be aware of our need for the things that they have in abundance that we are really in short supply of. But those are the things that we get to discover on this partnership journey. And we identified 150 kids that we would specifically, monetarily support and partner with in Shone Gerbe area. And we wanted to rally families and individuals around all 150 of them, knowing that that was a big goal. Like, that's a lot of kids when our faith family isn't that huge. But we, thankfully, covered 75 kids. Half of those kids were covered with partnerships last week alone. Yes. Thank you for leading that clap because we needed it. That is amazing. And if you weren't here, or you missed out, or you're like, you needed to think things through and figure things out still, it's all right. It's all good. We can still sign up. My family wasn't able to do it last week. It was Mother's Day, and I tend to work on Sundays. And then Jessica texts me, like, we've got a kid that's puking right now. And I'm like, Happy Mother's Day. I can't help you. And so clearly we were not having family pictures taken that day or doing anything. So later in the week, we grabbed one of these that you can still grab on your way out over there at the kind of chapel type structure. Grab a picture. There's only like 3 different pictures. The picture's irrelevant. What's important is on the back. It will walk you step by step how to become a partner. And it's super easy. And then you get to upload a picture of your choosing. Or you can, if you need to, if you feel like you need technological help, our welcome area people would be happy to grab the iPad, take a picture, help you do that, walk you through it. No worries. But this has it all there. And it was cool to sit down with my family and talk about how, hey, what do you guys think we're going to get out of this partnership? What are the things that maybe they have in abundance that we have very little of? And actually, our speaker next week, his name is Josh Bitework. He's the executive director of Love in Action. And he's going to be sharing about what we're doing and bringing Living Hope locally right here in our neighborhood. Today I want to look a little regionally as well as locally, but he and I were talking about this, and he's saying, and I hope he repeats this next week, but we are a highly medicated and depressed and anxious nation. And in amongst our prosperity, we have a lot of disorders, and they don't have that in Ethiopia. What's going on there? And what do we have to learn? And what do we have to benefit? Because our lifestyles, so I was shared this with my kids. They were all excited. So I'm looking forward to growing in this partnership and seeing what happens. And you don't want to miss next week either. Josh is a great speaker, and I already know what he's speaking on, and I think it's cool. So you don't want to miss it. Okay, so I wanted to share, like I said, regionally and locally, and I had an opportunity to take a trip recently in April. Originally, my daughter Zoe, who's 15, and I were signed up to go on the Haiti trip. We partner with, I'm sure you've seen and heard from our Haiti trips if you've been hanging around for a while. And but because of the unrest, the political, civil unrest that was happening in Haiti at that point in the spring, the United States was even pulling out their official employees and the embassy residents and workers. And so we were like, maybe we should pump the brakes on this and postpone our Haiti trip a little bit. But we had another opportunity. I had another opportunity drop in our lap. Autumn Zimmerman is a watermarker, and she works for a group, an organization called Experience Mission. And we partner with Experience Mission to send our trips to Haiti. Well, she said, hey, Tom's Experience Mission is also sending a bunch of us employees to the border in South Texas, in a town just outside of McAllen, Texas, to see what's going on there and to hear the stories and to get a feel for maybe we can send churches down there to be a part of helping and assisting what's going on. Would you like to come? I'm like, heck yes, I'd like to be there. So Zoe and I went, Autumn was there, and Zach Frederick also went, but then it was all just Experience Mission employees. And we went there to just learn and listen and to see firsthand what's taking place along a certain stretch of border in the Rio Grande Valley. And it was an amazing trip. Personally, there was also this added bonus that the first point leader person for Experience Mission that was leading our trips in Haiti, like we have a leader, a Watermark leader that leads the trip, but then we also have a point person that works for Experience Mission. That first person in Haiti, his name was Jan Moya. And I had the privilege of being on that first team, and I took my oldest son at that point, Spencer, and we got to meet Jan and get to know him a little bit. And he's been with Experience Mission for years now, but he grew up right there in Far, Texas, outside of McAllen, and his family's still there, his parents are still there. 6 siblings, I believe. And over the course of his journey, he was telling me this when we were down there, his parents were really concerned about setting up all of the kids well for success and to do well and to build on what they were able to build on by coming to this country and setting up a life for them, a different life than what was available to them at that point in Mexico. And so Jan tells me that his parents, with every good intention that a parent musters, said, just be an American. You're an American citizen. You are an American. No matter how people talk to you, no matter what you look like, be American. And so that was the attitude he kind of took through life and fully embraced that. And yet, as he got older, got married, was traveling abroad, living in Minnesota currently, encountering all of these different worlds and worldviews, he felt like there was a piece of his identity that he had just ignored, that he had just kind of shoved under the rug. And of course, he had been getting to know his full identity as the son of the Father, God, which trumps everything. It's the complete identity, but there is this piece as a Mexican American that he had not explored. And so he took a little sabbatical and he traveled the border and he heard stories and he visited places and he got in touch with that side of his heritage and his family's story. And so he's very proudly a Mexican American who's full on a child of God, first and foremost a citizen of the kingdom. But he's inviting people through this organization that he's developed called Border Perspectives, and you can throw up the graphic for that, to come down and experience things and to hear these stories. And these are stories of both immigrants, refugees, documented and undocumented, These are stories of people who live in the area. They're locals who maybe they've been there a short time. Maybe they've been there for decades and decades. They are Christians, and they are people of every faith and no faith at all, and get to learn different people's perspective on what's going on and how that's playing out, especially in a climate where our political and social conversation on this is really polarizing. And you can throw up the slide with the headlines. I grabbed a bunch of headlines just yesterday. I grabbed these headlines of kind of the political discourse and the immigration conversation that's happening in our country right now. And it can be difficult to have a conversation when people feel passionately, and there's often big emotions like fear and other things tied into this that push the conversation in all sorts of different directions. And so I think the Bible has an amazing amount of principles for us to glean in terms of knowing how we interact with immigrants, strangers, foreigners, however you want to articulate that. Those are words the Bible uses. But it's difficult to come up with a policy, a national policy, based on how God acted through a nomadic group of people throughout the Old Testament, and to place that on top of these governmental societies that we have. So I'm not even going there. I think you need to discover it. I think you need to sink deeply into what God says and how he feels about crossing borders and people from wherever they're at. But at the same point, what we were doing was just going to listen and to see where God was alive and well and bringing hope, living hope, to this situation that's really tense, and to a situation that's often people feel powerless and like they don't have a say, but they're looking for something better. They're looking for basic needs or basic security and safety and hoping to find it here. And so we wanted to hear those stories, and of course, we may end up leading teams down the road as well where we can go and listen together. But that was the personal side of why we went. Excuse me, and I've got a cough that we're developing. Now, because I coughed on you, we're all getting this thing. So let me just share some of this story. On the first night that we got down there, Zoe and I got there ahead of the team, and so we had a couple of extra days. And the first night was Wednesday night. We were hanging out with the Moya family, Jan's parents. Among other things, he's a pastor of a small church there. It had been a church that met in their garage, and now it meets in this room that they rent in the back of a tire shop. And they've decked it all out, and they've got the speaker system, and they worship awesome, loud, great, all in Spanish. I love being able to stick my daughter into a situation that when I was 15 years old and moved to a different country, didn't understand a lick of what was going on, and yet got to be a part of it and struggle to understand and yet see these beautiful people worshiping the same Jesus that I follow in a completely different way. And it just gives life. And so it was cool to have my daughter experience that as well. At the end of that worship gathering, together as a group, they took the offerings and we all headed toward the Salvation Army. There are two organizations in the area that are assisting with the immigrants that have been let through the detention center. And they now need to get to their sponsor locations, where sponsors are far and away usually family, cousins, relatives of any sort that they've had a connection. They said, you need to come. We'll figure out how to get you up here once you're across the border. And so there are these points where the Salvation Army and Catholic Charities are helping them connect to their sponsorship points and get to where they're headed. They'll have a hearing where they can determine whether they'll get to stay legally. And then there's these basic needs that you also run into once you're there. It's not just like people who don't speak English and they're stuck and they don't know how to get to where they don't have a phone, they don't have any way to communicate with these people. They don't know what the situation, the arrangements have been made for how they're going to get there. They've never been there. How do you navigate a bus system? How do you navigate an airport? And so they have people at these centers who very simply put together a packet, an envelope, and they've been in conversation with the sponsor, and they write out, this is your itinerary. And at the very top it says, please help me. I don't speak English. Can you help me find my connection? And they take this on their journey with them, and hopefully a kind soul will help them get to the next connection. Because what they are finding at the bus stop, right there, the bus depot right there in McAllen, was that people were coming in. They had tickets to different places. A mom and her young child had a ticket. It was close, but different stations on different days. Imagine trying to navigate that if you don't speak the language and you don't know the system. And so just having helpful people who can just mitigate all of that chaos. And at the Salvation Army that night, that day, they had just had a busload of 50 new refugee seekers to our country. When we got there, it was so weird to walk in that room full of cots where they had already been given showers and warm meals, because who knows how long it had been since they had eaten or drank, and kids with them, and they were resting and they were weary, and you could have a sense of anxiety as well that was in the room, because they didn't know what was going to happen next or how it was going to take place. And so Pastor Hugo and Onisi is Jan's parents' names. They said, we're just going to go in. We're going to sit down and ask people their stories and just listen. If they don't want to share, it's great. Let them rest. If they want to share, maybe this can be part of healing from something that's been a pretty traumatic journey to get here. And then pray with them. And we also have Spanish Bibles if they're interested in that. And so I was trying to stick with people that could translate for me, but it wasn't always happening. So I only got a couple of snippets of stories. But there was one young man in his late 20s who had come from Guatemala. And the vast majority of these refugee seekers were from Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Honduras. And he had, because his brother had been kidnapped by gang members there in Guatemala, he decided he was going to leave and try to find safety elsewhere. So he packed up his 18-month-old son, and they walked 27 days through Mexico. And they were tired and hungry, and they had been in sticky, dangerous situations. And he was just glad to be there. And he actually crossed illegally. He threw his son on his shoulders and waded through the Rio Grande and turned himself over to officials, to authorities, just because he didn't know where to go or who to turn to. And so they spent a couple days in a detention center before he was allowed in. And just to hear what people are trying to run from, the danger they're willing to expose themselves and their kids to, because what they're currently in is worse, it's hard to imagine, right? It's hard to put yourself in that kind of a place. And there was another family, a young mom with her 2 kids, and she was pregnant, and her youngest was, probably 2, 3 maybe, and clearly he's sick, didn't feel good, was tired, was crying, was inconsolable the whole time. We're trying to play with him, brought a car, did stuff, just nothing. Because you can imagine just the insecurity, the fear, the not feeling good. And I'm just praying the whole time, God, I don't feel like I can do anything to help these people. I can't do anything to even just love on them. I can't even speak Spanish well. I sit there and smile. But as she was sharing her story, I very clearly got the picture of Hagar from the book of Genesis in the Bible. And if you haven't read the story of Hagar, just Google Hagar, Genesis. You'll find it. You should read the story. But she also was actually kicked out, exiled from her home, from her family, from everything that she knew. And she was a foreigner she was an outsider to this family group. Kicked out with her young child, no place to go, no way to make ends meet to feed herself, let alone her kid. And she finds herself just sitting down and waiting to die. And while she's there, probably talking to God the whole time, God shows up for her. And it's really interesting, the exchange, because God basically reveals, Hagar, I know you, I've seen you, I've been with you the whole time, and I will be with you going forward, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter the danger that you face, no matter the hardships that you go through, I am here with you. And all of a sudden, this God, who may have been the God of Abraham, her master, the guy who had everything going for him, the guy who had wealth, who had means, who had a huge family, who had kicked her out, became the God who sees her. And that was her name for him. You are the God who sees me. And it was that picture that I thought of while this lady was sharing. And so I found the passage and I gave it to them. And I said, would you just share this with her? I don't know that this is from God, but I hope it's encouraging to her. And then as they read it all together and she began to read those words that he is the God who sees me, just the tears started to flow. And that's not what I was going for. I just hoped that she sensed that there was someone who was there with her and watching her. And I think to experience somebody who has possibly no hope or very little hope, experience a God who cares that deeply about her and her kids and where she's going and how she's going to get there is a game changer. That's living hope. And I don't think we understand living hope unless we're in those, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say we don't understand living hope. We don't have the depth of experience with living hope unless we're in that desperate of circumstances. And fortunately, we can connect with people who are, and we can ally with people who are, and make sure that they have an experience with Jesus, have an encounter with a God who loves them. It's interesting because in Scripture, God has a very clear direction on how the people of Israel, his family on this planet, were supposed to interact with other people, other nations, and even people who would come and live among them. And I'm going to read for you in a second out of Leviticus chapter 19, which is largely a book of rules. But this chapter in particular, I read it as if God is really culture shaping. He's culture shaping his family and how this family was going to be different than a lot of the other families and the way a lot of the other ways that human organizations ran at that point in human history. And so there's a lot of do's and don'ts. You need to interact this way, not this way. And in the middle of that is this passage. Let's read it on the screen. I think it's Leviticus 19:33. Do not take advantage of foreigners who live among you in your land. Treat them like native-born Israelites and love them. Hold on to this. Love them as you love yourself. In other words, these people who've come to you, they speak a different language. They eat differently. They probably smell differently. You think they're second-class citizens or people. They're not. They're people that I love and that you need to take care of and treat as if they were your own brothers and sisters. They're your own family. Love them as you love yourselves. That's how I want you to treat them. And then here's why. The second half of this verse. Remember that you were once foreigners living in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. I'm the one who actually rescued you out of that place where you were in slavery. And if you guys will remember that story, your ancestors, he's talking to them and probably to us as well. Your ancestors emigrated to Egypt because they were in a famine and they had no other options. It was basically starve to death and watch all their animals and families starve to death, or move to a place where there was actually grain and water and resources. And so they went. And as they got there, there was all sorts of cool things that God had in store for them while they were there. But they prospered and they grew, and their family size grew, and they got wealthy. And then the Egyptians began to notice them because all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of people that didn't look like them, talk like them, or act like them, and they were afraid of them. And so they were trying to figure out, we need to do something about this situation or we will lose control and power and influence in the situation. So they decided to make this people group slaves, reduce their ability to gain resources, limit their ability to reproduce, and control a people group this way. And they were in slavery for hundreds of years, crying out to God until God finally said, that's enough. This is going to change. And he freed them in dramatic fashion. And he's saying, now that you're through the wilderness and into the promised land, you have people that are going to live like you. Remember, you were once them. Remember that you were once in those same situations, and remember how you were treated. You're going to flip the script, and it's going to look completely different. And it's never happened that way in the history of civilization until that moment in time. But this is how it's going to happen, or at least it's supposed to happen. And as I read that passage and as I began to understand it with the stories that I was encountering of people coming into our country, I began to realize that there isn't actually an us and them. I mean, we as humans, we kind of crave it. We like it. It's helpful for us to identify, to affiliate with people who are like us, who do things like us, talk like us, have similar values. And so we tend to congregate in similar churches, neighborhoods, you name it. It's just easier that way. But God's never been an us and them kind of God, because God is always pursuing the them. He pursued the them himself by coming down here and becoming them and powerless. And then I had to realize, oh yeah, I've been whoever them is as well. It's an us thing. Because I've been in a situation where I've lived in a different country and I've known how that's felt. I've been in a situation with a young family where we didn't have the income to make ends meet. And we stood in lines for WIC and for food stamps and bridge cards. And we got the condescending treatment from the government employees who were helping us to the cash register employees who were helping us. We've been in the spot where we could really only afford one car at that point. And so, you know what? To get the kids around, we do this. I'm just going to walk or ride my bike or bum a ride off of people consistently, which kind of stinks, having to beg for a ride all the time. But you know what? I've been there. It's not that big of a deal. I know what this is like. I need to treat people not as a them, but as an us, because we've all been there. And except for the grace of God, 1 week from now, 2 years from now, we might all be in that situation again. Maybe some of us are right now. And so it was just for me one of those clear pictures of how God was inviting me to remember that there's people around me. There's one other incident where this became crystal clear for me. And again, keep in mind, I'm not talking about immigration policy, political conversation. I'm talking about there are people in our midst who are different, right? And how do we treat them? So the other spot that I mentioned that is helping with these newcomers to our country was Catholic Charities, is Catholic Charities. And they had a building that we went to, that we worked with, where the years leading up to this, they were processing around 100, maybe 200 people per day, giving out showers, food, new sets of clothes for any age and range, and then giving out these envelopes and making those contacts. They stay there for a day or two, and then they send them on their way and get them going where they're headed. In this past school year, since last summer, I should say, they've been processing 500 to over 1,000 people a day. They have one full-time employee and 5 volunteers. Can you imagine how worn out they are? They care, they want to help, but the need is so huge, they are overrun, and you cannot process people that quickly, let alone help them not feel like just cattle being herded, but actually people who are loved and welcomed and in a fresh new start, and there's possibilities for them. How do you do that? And so we got the opportunity to jump in with both feet with the people that we had, and we helped organize and sort clothes, we helped give out clothes, we helped do whatever we could. Those of us spoke Spanish, made some of those phone calls. That was not me. I wish I could. And so just in this amazing, welcoming, humanitarian service that's going on here. And it thankfully, they were getting in resources and stuff just as fast as it was going out. I don't even know where it was coming from, but and they need that. But here's the interesting thing that got me thinking. This location, and you can put a picture of that location up now, the Catholic Charities Center. It used to be a nursing home. They converted it into a place to process these immigrants, these refuge seekers. And it's in a neighborhood. And the neighborhood doesn't really like what they're doing because there's a whole lot of people all of a sudden in their neighborhood. And they're out with their kids walking up and down their sidewalks. And so Catholic Charities tries to keep people close to home, just stay on our property, don't wander around. But still, it's unsightly. And there's water runoff from the emergency shower systems that they have that runs out into the street. And it makes everything a little bit messy and uncomfortable. And in a town, McAllen, Texas, where 90% of the population is Hispanic, and so I'm making a huge assumption without doing the research, probably first and second generation maybe, a lot of first and second generation immigrants living in that neighborhood no longer want to help the very people that they were simply years ago. And I was angry. I was really angry. I was like, who do you think you are? What? You can, like, I understand it's an inconvenience, but you understand the inconvenience these people are going to trying to find something possibly better. And they're here legally. Help a brother out. And as I got angry, and as I stewed on it, as I thought about it, and I prayed about it, all of a sudden, God's like, he wasn't guilty. He's never guilting with me, but I know when I've been going stinking thinking route, because he's like, do you think you're any different than the people that live in that neighborhood? I'm like, oh, shoot, here it comes. Really, are the people in West Michigan any different than the humans that live on the south side of Texas? Same human beings. There's people that we don't want to live in our neighborhoods and that we don't want to live by because they look different. They talk different. They are different, whatever. They're messy. We don't want them in our town or our space or our area. And so I'm like, okay, there's probably people that I am overlooking, that I don't want to deal with, that I have just, their need is too great and I feel too helpless and I don't want to get involved. It's just easier that way. God's saying, how about we open your eyes to where that situation that's happening there is happening all around you? And so I came back with a determination to allow God to show me where there might be situations in our area that I'm overlooking. And there's lots of them. And I think there's a lot of great people doing a lot of great things to help a lot of great people. There are services out there. But there's, interestingly enough, ones that I don't want to be involved with. On the other side, there are ones that I do want to be involved with, and I am involved with. And so I want to say this very clearly before I jump to here's some opportunities for you. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus is talking about what's going to happen at the end when there's a judgment, when there's a sorting out of everything before he's going to make everything right the way it's supposed to be. And he refers to this one group of people who they had been following Jesus, and they've been doing amazing things the way Jesus wanted them to do it, but they never saw it. They're like, when did we see you like this? And he said, whenever you saw me, whenever you saw that person who was hungry and you gave them food, they were naked and you gave them clothes, they were thirsty, you gave them water, they were a stranger, a foreigner, not like you, and you welcomed them in. You did these things to me and for me. You allied yourself with me because you were allying yourself with people who weren't like you. And then he turned to another group who decided that they were going to live their life a completely different way because they had different values. They wanted to pursue different things. And they said, we didn't see you there either. And he said, that's because you ignored me when I was hungry and when I was in prison and when I was the stranger. And you guys, I'm going to allow you to go and follow your pursuits and your values and your dreams in your own way. So for those of us here, I know probably most of you are aligning yourselves in some way, shape, or form with people that God values very much and is inviting us to ally our lives with. But I wonder if there's still some blind spots where he's wanting to open our eyes. And that's where I'd invite you to maybe take that humble approach. And I had planned to get into Philippians chapter 2, which you're just going to have to read yourself. Philippians chapter 2, and figure out that humble approach that God modeled in Jesus of letting go of the things that we can control or the things that we have every right to or privilege or advantage of holding on to so that others can grab a hold of it. You are doing that already. Don't feel beat up when you have aligned your lives there. But are there some blind spots where he's still inviting us into deeper? So let me just run over a couple of things that I came across, because one of the first things I thought of on the way back was, you know what? We do have an immigrant population, a refugee population from Bhutan and Nepal. And I think actually most of them are Bhutanese via Nepal just to get out of dangerous political situations. Ended up here, found out how they ended up here because Bethany Christian Services had become aware of them coming into the country and were tasked with the responsibility of finding a location to settle them, to give them a home. And so Bethany called all the churches in the area and said, hey, what can you do? And because churches in our area partnered together, we were able to bring this significant sized Bhutanese a group of people with their family ties and their social ties, so they didn't feel alone and isolated. They had those connections still. And I've gotten to meet them on a regular basis because there are those who come and do their laundry in our laundry hub in the back of our building. Now, have I sat down and listened to their stories much? No. But they're here, and I'm glad they're here, and I want to hear their stories. But I got to thinking, well, who's the new people that Bethany's trying to work with now? So I called Bethany, and they said, well, far and away, we're being inundated with the opportunity to welcome unaccompanied minors who, for whatever reason, are separated from their parents or their primary caregivers when they get into the United States, or they came alone if they're 16, 17, 18, that happens as well. But all of these kids who've been separated, they don't speak the language, they don't know where they're going, they don't know why they've been separated by the ones who've raised them and loved them the most, and they're grieving, and they're traumatized, and they need a place to stay for like anywhere from 10 days to 6 months while the U.S. tries to figure out, while the government systems that we have in place try to find their sponsor family, vet their sponsor family, because we don't have anything to do with sexual trafficking and that kind of thing. It's a legit process, but they need a home. They just need somebody to love on them for that period of time till we can get them to their family or their loved ones who are going to take care of them from here. I'm like, cool, I'll let them know about it. So if you go to wm.church, I just created a little logo that says Thompson's Teaching. And if you click on that, there are 3 links there. The first one is to Bethany, and you can put that picture up there, Keegan, for me, of what their website looks like and what you'll find when you click on the link, and you can find out what it might look like to open your home. But I understand that that's a big deal. That's like, I mean, it's not extreme, but you're talking polar. You're way opening your life and your home and your family, which is great. But there are simple ways too if you're not there yet. They need provisions for the foster homes and families that are taking care of these kids. They need even things like suitcases with wheels on them that are carry-on size that can be thrown in an overhead bin to send down to these border areas to bring the kids here because they don't have anything to pack their stuff in or to bring with them. And so they've got an Amazon wish list. There's a link to an Bethany Amazon wish list. You can click on it and see what they're needing for the kids, that we're taking care of. And then the third thing is Border Perspectives, who I hope to go back and have teams go with us. But they put together care packages, welcome kits, this basic essentials, washcloth, toothbrush, hygiene type stuff. You can give money and have them assemble kits there, or you can just buy the stuff here and assemble it yourself. Ziplocs, send it down there. All of the instructions are on that website. Again, you can just go there, check out the links. Just a few ways that I looked into that maybe if you're feeling like this is an opportunity that Jesus is inviting you into, a blind spot that he's opening up for you, that maybe you could play a part. There's billions of other ways. It doesn't have to be this one. We're partnering with Ethiopia. We're partnering here. We've got Kids Belong. We've got next week we're going to hear about Love in Action. There's lots of opportunities. But where's God inviting you to bring living hope? I want to wrap up with this passage of scripture out of Philippians 3. I had to skip the Philippians 2 part, but I just feel like this sets the framework for us really well. Philippians chapter 3, Paul and Timothy are writing this letter as slaves of Jesus. He's like, you guys, we're nothing. We're just slaves. But we're writing you and we're encouraging you that God is bigger and that his hope is greater. And here's what he says, and I took this out of the Message translation. He says, stick with me, friends. Keep track of those you see running the same course, headed for the same goal. There are many out there taking other paths, choosing other goals, trying to get you to go along with them. I've warned you of them many times. Sadly, I'm having to do it all again. All they want is easy street. They hate Christ's cross. I mean, easy street is easier. There's a reason why making our lives about ourselves is easier. But easy street, it's a dead-end street. Those who live there make their bellies their gods, belches of their praise. All they can think of is their appetites. I've been them as well, and am tempted to go down that road all the time. But there's far more to life for us because we're different. We're part of a bigger family. We're citizens of a different social construct, a different government organization. We're citizens of God's kingdom, of heaven. We're waiting the arrival of the Savior, the Master Jesus Christ, who will transform not only our earthly bodies into glorious bodies like his own, but he's going to transform this whole situation. The invitation is, will we play a part in that? Is that our path? Is that where we're headed? And so right now I'd like us to wrap up by singing this song of declaration, that is, in fact, that's the path I'm choosing. I need to rededicate myself to it every once in a while. I need to recognize the blind spots I have every once in a while. But this is the path I'm on, no matter what. No matter who else is on that path with me. And it's a song that a lot of you, if you've been a part of the Christian subculture for any stretch of time, you're like, oh, that's an oldie. But it's a goodie. And while I was there, we got to do 3 worship services. So we did this song 3 times. Every time we were in worship service, we did this song. And we did it in Spanish, which you don't want me to do for you. So we're going to do it in English. But would you join me as we just sing this as Christian leads us, and I have decided to follow Jesus.
Decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. No turning back. No turning back. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. No turning back, no turning back, no turning back, no turning back.
Father God, we thank you for becoming flesh and living with us to give us a practical example of loving the outcasts and the strangers. We pray that your love would transform us into a family, into people who dine with sinners and don't care that that's who we dine with. That like Jesus, we would love our neighbors and not just the people who it's easy to love. Because Jesus said that's not a hard love. That's not a choice of love. We pray that we could love others the way you loved us, sacrificially and as servants, not lording it over others, but that we would humble ourselves and that we would just love those who need love and who need help. And it wouldn't be an empty love, but a full, tangible love. In your name, amen. Well, thank you all for gathering with us today. We are super excited you are here with us. If you are new or this is one of your first times gathering with us, we're especially grateful you're here. And if you'd like to go back to the welcome area, we have a gift we'd love to give to you. And otherwise, enjoy the rain, I guess. Stay dry, and we will see you next week. If you need prayer, there will be prayer up front.